Silent Hill 2 is one of those rare games that I think after you complete it, you feel emotionally drained. You know, you feel like you've actually kind of been through something almost. And even though not many people can relate to James's problem of having his dead wife write him a letter, I think that it's still a game that you can really connect with, and I think it is a game that means something to so many people. And Billy Cobb, for those who are unaware, is a guy who makes music on YouTube. And he's best known, I think, for doing a lot of covers. You know, he does a lot of covers of popular songs, and he puts his own alternative rock spin on them, and, you know, a lot of them are quite good. I've been following him for a few years. You know, he released the Zerwi EP, which is essentially a tribute to Weezer. So you find folks at home might be wondering, why is this insane man talking about Silent Hill 2 and Billy Cobb? And the answer to that is quite simple, which is that Billy Cobb released an EP that is Silent Hill 2 inspired, called In My Restless Dreams. You see, listening to this EP made me think a lot about the nature of inspiration versus imitation. And so I guess I just wanted to talk about that and share my thoughts on it. So I think that Billy Cobb's In My Restless Dreams EP is interesting for a number of reasons. And one of the main reasons it's interesting to me is because of the fact that it is a Silent Hill music project that does not try to replicate the soundtrack of Silent Hill. So the Silent Hill games were mostly scored by one dude, Akira Yamaoka, who he scored basically all of them except for Downpour and Book of Memories. And his soundtrack work is just phenomenal for a number of reasons, mostly because it's able to capture any mood that it needs to. So basically, if the game wants to make you feel scared, he can do that. He'll throw in the industrial clanging sounds, he'll throw in, you know, that horrible meatpacking factory stuff, and it will scare the crap out of you. Or if the game wants you to feel something more emotional, you know, something more wistful, you know, regretful, or maybe despairing, he can capture all those feelings perfectly as well. And I think his soundtracks are special because they can be enjoyed just as albums. You know, I don't think that you even need to be a fan of the Silent Hill games to, you know, enjoy his music. And so his soundtracks always feature, you know, a variety of instruments. Oftentimes he'll feature these really cool electric guitars. You know, I saw one time where someone said that he sounded like a rock star basically anytime there was just a non-scary part of the game, and that's kind of true. You know, his music is actually very, there's a lot going on. It's not always easy to focus on what's going on just because, you know, the music is playing and it's so beautiful, and also just it's so layered and deep. You know, and these soundtracks feature any number of instruments. You do hear the aforementioned, you know, industrial percussion kind of sounds, but you also have a lot of soft guitar, you have a lot of acoustic guitar, you do have some electric guitar parts, and you have these freaking, you know, awesome guitar solos and stuff like that. But really, I think that anytime people talk about the Silent Hill soundtracks, unless they're talking about a specific track, like Promise or Love Psalm or Theme of Laura, oftentimes they're referring to the more general ambient sounds, the just general ambience that is featured on the soundtracks. And a great example of this is something like the track White Noise, where it's just kind of, it's textures, right? It's not so much of a normal song, it's just kind of moody sounds to play in the background whenever you're running around town or whenever you need to beat something to death with a plank of wood. You know, it's music that is excellent, but it's not meant to be the focal point. And so something that's very interesting to me is that if you Google Silent Hill inspired music, the kind of music that always comes up is stuff that sounds like white noise. You know, it's stuff that sounds like ambience, stuff that sounds like, you know, just not exactly an ocean in the background, but that kind of same thing where it's more textures and it's more feelings and it's less a structured song. And so people love the Silent Hill games, and so they seek to replicate the emotions that they find in them. And so that's one of the reasons why you have people who make this kind of music, basically, is because they go, you know, Silent Hill did this, and so I'm going to make these cool ambient tracks. And a lot of the time they are cool. A lot of the time they are, you know, fun to listen to. Or maybe fun is not the right word, but, you know, I stick them on in the background while I'm like doing writing or something, you know, which is not exactly fun. I'm now realizing as I'm saying this. So maybe they're not fun. But a lot of these tracks are good, and they kind of fill their role quite well. So imagine my shock and my surprise whenever I put on Billy Cobb's In My Restless Dreams EP, and it does not sound like that. It does not sound like someone just trying to replicate the ambience of Silent Hill. Really, I think that this EP, if I had to categorize it, it falls squarely in the alternative rock category. But also I think that there are a lot of other things going on. There are a lot of cool samples. There's a little bit of the ambience that I was talking about. There are definitely some very harsh samples used in something like track 4, which kind of creates an uneasy atmosphere. And essentially what this EP is it feels like Billy Cobb kind of drew on some of the ideas found in the Silent Hill soundtracks, but not really. I think that the best way I can put it is that instead of trying to write songs that sounded like the songs found in the Silent Hill soundtracks, What Billy Cobb did is he wrote songs that happened to be about Silent Hill 2. In essence, Billy Cobb is not trying to replicate or just copy or completely rip off Akira Yamaoka. Billy is just out here doing his own thing, and some of the lyrics pull directly from Silent Hill 2, right? Some of the lines are just straight up quotes. Like I said, he samples the game and puts some of those samples into the EP and into the music. There are a couple snippets in the EP that sound like songs from the original soundtrack. Like there's one point where it sounds like he's playing Theme of Laura, and there's another part that sounds like white noise, but these are just kind of clips. These aren't the entire song. You know, there are some obvious references to like Pyramid Head. There are references to like the character of Angela and the Flames. And it's cool because some tracks are written from different characters' perspectives. So the first one is pretty obviously written about James. Track 3, on the other hand, seems to be about Mary, James's dead wife. And so you do have the bits and pieces in there that are kind of lifted straight from the original game. But at the same time, it feels like the purpose of the EP was not to just replicate the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack or to replicate the game exactly, but rather, like I said, to write songs that happen to be about Silent Hill 2. And they're good songs, and that's what I really love about it. You know, that's why I've enjoyed listening to this EP for the past like 2 months, I think, month and a half. I don't know when it came out. Time is fake. And much like the original Silent Hill 2 soundtrack, I think that this is an EP that even if you haven't played the original game, I think you can still enjoy it. Normally, I don't find much joy whenever someone tries to say, oh yeah, my project it's inspired by this thing, because usually what they mean is whenever they say that something is inspired, that just means they're ripping it off. Like, let's be real. And honestly, this kind of weakens my argument, and I fully acknowledge that, but I don't feel comfortable listing off examples, you know? I don't want to point at stuff and be like, this is clearly ripping off this thing, just because I know that a lot of hard work goes into anything, even if I do feel like it is a complete ripoff. Like I said earlier, the CP has really gotten me thinking a lot about the nature of imitation versus inspiration, and really kind of where the line is between those two. They say that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, but honestly, it just kind of feels sucky whenever someone copies you, I feel like, because it's like, hey, that's my thing, you know? It's like, hey, I was the first person to wear those giant clocks around my neck, you stop that. Remember, kids, time is fake. And it's like, hey, I was original, but now I'm not original because they're copycats. And so as I was thinking about this and I was trying to decide where's the line between inspiration versus imitation, and apparently it's right here in front of me, and so this is the end of the video because I figured it out. So anyways, thank you, have a nice night, see ya. No, but seriously, like I was saying, where do you draw the line exactly between imitation and inspiration? When does one thing step into the other? And I think that the problem is that whenever we talk about something as being a cheap imitation or a ripoff versus, you know, a project that is inspired by someone, you know, inspired by another artist or another game series or something like that, I think that the problem is that we use terms that are kind of amorphous and, you know, vague and just kind of blobs, right? That don't actually mean much, that aren't really tangible. So for instance, we refer to things that are imitations as being soulless. And it's like, what exactly does that mean? And it's like, well, if it's soulless, it doesn't have heart. And it's like, okay, what does it mean to have heart, right? Can you put it for me in concrete terms instead of being so abstract? But I do think that imitations a lot of the time kind of remind us of things that we've already seen without adding anything new to the formula. I think that's really kind of what it is. And I think it's the newness, I think it's the novelty that kind of makes something feel more inspired. You know, whether it is actively trying to, you know, copy something or whether it is trying to be its own work, I think that it is that novelty, that special influence, that new thing, that X factor, right? You know, just, again, I'm being vague, I'm being, you know, non-concrete, but I don't know how else to explain it, right? Because the problem is that whenever you talk about something being new or something being original, you can always point to something that the so-called original or new work is kind of aping and stealing from. And so there's this idea that's been talked about that nothing is truly original, but at the same time, that in itself is kind of BS, because it's like, you know, if you see something and no one has ever done anything quite like it before, I think it's fair to call that original. You know, 100% original? No, but, you know, what is, right? And I think it's important to talk about the difference between imitation versus inspiration, especially if you're doing any kind of creative work, because there are times when you yourself, if you're making something, you feel like you might be ripping something else off, even if you're not. And I think that the biggest thing that separates an imitation versus something that is more original is just the lack of its own voice, you know? Like I was saying earlier, I think imitations don't bring anything new to the mix. They don't bring anything new to the world. And so that's what makes them boring. That's what makes people like me not like direct imitations, right? Is just, if I wanted the thing, I would go to the thing. You know, if I want to play Devil May Cry, I'm going to go play Devil May Cry. I'm not going to get, you know, great value brand Devil May Cry. You know, I don't think you'll ever be able to replicate someone else's voice just because you have not had the same exact experiences as them, right? You haven't had the same experiences, you haven't lived the same life, you don't have the same inspirations and influences. You're not that person, right? You're you. I think you can actually learn a lot from trying to copy someone's style. You know, I think you can learn a lot from actually trying to make something as you think another person might make it. And so I think it can be very beneficial to you as a creator of sorts. But ultimately, I don't think that anything you do that is trying to imitate someone else will stand the test of time. And so I mentioned this earlier, Billy Cobb, you know, he released this Silent Hill EP that, you know, I really enjoy. He also released some Zerwe albums, right? The Weezer tribute albums. I really enjoy those and I like them a lot. But at the same time, I don't think that, I don't know that anyone would say that they're as good as the original Weezer albums. I don't know that anyone would say that they're as good as the Blue album. You know, and I don't even think that Billy Cobb himself would say that. And I don't think that those albums are, you know, exact rip-offs of like Blue Album or Pinkerton or any other Weezer record. But I do think that, you know, at the end of the day, it's still him trying to imitate Weezer. And like, that's literally the point of the project, right? Is he's trying to imitate Weezer. And he's clear with that, right? He's obvious, right? He doesn't try to hide it. And I like these albums, but they're not going to stand the test of time the same way that Pinkerton is. But I gotta give Billy Cobb credit, because even with what I've been saying about the voice and not being able to perfectly replicate the artistic voice, he acknowledged something like that in the interview, and he said that, you know, every Weezer album has its own identity. Every Weezer album, whether good or bad, is unique at the very least. And so he said that he tried to do that with his two Zerwe records, right? As he tried to do something with them to make them unique and to make them their own records, as opposed to just completely cheap, shameless imitation, you know, rip-offs of Weezer. And so I think that's why those records are, I think, good, right? I think they're good, but I don't think they're great in the same way that the Blue album is. And so, like I said, I think imitating someone can definitely be great for you just as an artist, as a creator, as someone who's trying to learn how other people do things. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with having a starting point. I don't think that there's anything wrong with pointing at something and saying, I want to do something like this. But I think that if you just kind of let things flow naturally, then I think that inevitably, if you bring your own life experience into it and your own influences, then I think that you will create something new. You know, I made a video about being yourself a few weeks back, and it kind of feels like that's where I'm heading again with this is, you know, it's like, just be yourself, bro. Just make your own art and do your own thing. But at the end of the day, I do think that's actually the way to do it. I don't think that you should try to rip off anyone else intentionally. I think that if you just kind of do your own thing, and if you do things the way that you want to do them, then you'll have your own voice, basically. And I don't think you'll have to worry too much about, you know, actually imitating someone directly. Will you be called an imitation? Maybe. But, you know, just because you're called something doesn't make it true, so. But I will say this, you know, I've seen this a lot, where people are scared of copying someone else. And so, for instance, I literally heard this in person the other day. I heard someone say this. This person wanted to be a writer, and so they said that they didn't read, even though they want to be a writer. And I'm like, what? And they're like, I don't want to be influenced by anything else, so I'm going to cut myself off from everything and not read. So that way I'll have my own ideas, and, you know, I will know that my ideas are mine. And it's like, that's not how that works. If you want to be original, or if you want to do something fresh, something new, then the way to do it is not to isolate yourself. You know, it's not to cut yourself off from every other artistic thing that's going on out there. What you have to do is the opposite. You have to completely immerse yourself in it. You have to drown yourself in new artistic influences and new art and, you know, all the rest. Because what happens is that whenever you do that, things just kind of jumble together in your head. Things come together and they clash and they break and they bend and they spill over into each other. And by the end of it, you'll have something new. And so really, I think that is the way to beat imitation, right? That is kind of the way to have your own voice, right? Is to take in as much crap as you can, and something will come of it. So anyways, going back to the In My Restless Dreams EP, I think that that's what makes this record special, basically, is it doesn't feel like Billy Cobb in this situation is trying to just directly copy someone. It doesn't feel like he's trying to rip off someone else. But I think he did a really great job of kind of capturing some of the feelings that Silent Hill 2 makes you feel. He did a great job of capturing that feeling of longing and that feeling of wanting. He captures that feeling of missing someone. And again, that's what the EP is, right? It's a freaking Silent Hill 2 tribute EP. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like he was just trying to copy it. And so that's what makes this work special to me. And I think I'll end with this. There's a quote from the romantic poet William Blake that goes something like this. If the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. And so I think that this quote is freaking phenomenal. It's kind of become a mantra for me. It's a quote that holds deep meaning for me personally. And so I'll give my interpretation of it. So the quote talks about the fool, right? The thing is that anytime you start something new, anytime you do something new, you are the fool. Whenever you first start doing something, whenever you do something for the very first time, you've never done it before, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what's good, you don't know what's bad, and you're just kind of filling around in the dark, trying to find something. And so whenever you first start, you're a fool, right? You just don't know any better, and that's what it is. But if you persist in your folly, or in other words, if you keep trying, if you keep learning, if you keep experimenting and just kind of discovering new things, then you will become wise. Or, you will become knowledgeable. You'll become a master. And so, if the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. Even if you feel like you're doing poorly, even if you feel like you're doing bad, even if you feel like you're dumb when you're first starting out. If you just keep trying, which is easier said than done, then eventually, sooner or later, you're going to figure things out. And so really, I think that this kind of applies to imitation, because whenever you first start doing anything, you're going to look to those things that made you want to start doing whatever it is you're doing in the first place. And you'll probably try to copy them. That's just the way things go. You'll probably try to imitate them. But if you keep trying and learning and exposing yourself to new things, then I think that, again, if you persist in your folly, you'll become wise. And so I think that is as good of a place as any to end it. So thank you for watching. As always, thank you for watching, and have a nice night. See ya.